Hello, everybody. Hi again. It's Brian Smith here for the Financial Empowerment Project Scale Up, put on by the Multicultural and Diversity Project. It is episode number 4. We are speaking to seniors in the community. We are speaking to them about their stories. We want to hear their lessons, their history. We want to find out what's going on in their minds and bringing it to you. This is, as I said, episode number 4 in a series of 8 podcasts that we will be bringing to you, courtesy, once again, of the Financial Empowerment Project Scale Up. And our guest this afternoon is Mr. David E. Edey. David, welcome.
Oh, Brian, that was a lot. That was quite the introduction. And everything that we're trying to accomplish here, wow, you put a lot of weight on me. Okay, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you much, David. And one thing with David, and we're going to throw this out because this is a chat. It's not an interview. This is a chat. I had the opportunity to meet David many, many years ago when I was working as a busboy at Cricket's Restaurant. And David was, I believe you had an office upstairs.
That's correct.
And you were all, I remember there was this younger black man who always used to come down, always well sharp dressed. And I know he was a money guy, you know, because even Mr. Lackman used to say, yeah, he's the money guy. He's the money guy. He's the money guy. And here it is now, probably 30 plus years later. You're a guest. We're here. We're talking about money and finance. So David, welcome.
Wow. So who was the guy that was the younger? Was he smaller? He was a smaller guy?
Actually, he used to lift weights. He used to be like...
I was more slender. Why are we going down
this
road?
Is it the same guy?
It's the same guy. First off, when you called and asked me to be on the show, you said, are you the same guy that worked at Cricket's? And I said yes, and I've been an advisor. And then what was the second thing I said to you? Was I nice to you?
Yeah, very nice.
Okay,
very nice.
I didn't want to.
Very impressionable too, because I look back at it too as well. As I said, it was me as a young black man, and you as a older, and said, well, there's a guy. There's a guy.
Am I older and
dressed.
Wiser?
Older and wiser. Well, you were into money, so we know you had to be wise. You had to be wise. But here we are, 30 plus years later, and we're talking about money and finance and,
And creating legacies.
And creating legacies. So, David E. Edey, and now I get the opportunity to ask you, we want to find out a little bit about your background, because we see your face all over social media. You even got a book out here, too. We're going to be talking about that later. But who is David E. Edey?
Well, I'm David Edey. I've born and raised here in Montreal. Okay. I am the proud son of Frank and Alberta, or Bert Edey. Grew up in NDG.
Wow. Another thing in common. I'm an NDG person too.
Are you?
What high school you went to? West Hill?
No, Monkland.
Oh, so you're older than me then. Okay, you're older than me.
Is that going to be like one of the themes part of this here? Is that where we're at now? Yeah, let's put it out there. Yes, you're a younger black man. I'm an older black man.
Older black man.
And I don't want to sound at the end of this like an old man.
Yeah, but that's a history lesson, people. Monkland's high school used to be actually the older West Hill.
That would be correct. Yes.
It used to be older West Hill, and then when they opened up West Hill, which is on Summerled, I believe they changed the name of the older West Hill, and it became Monkland's High School.
That's right.
Yeah.
But truth be told, historically, the more intelligent, the more nicer people went to Monkland's, as opposed to sort of the uppity ones went to West Hill, and the ones that usually end up in the penitentiaries are at Marymount. So that's just that's a little bit of a history thing.
NDG back in the day.
So I don't want to say that our school was better, but I will say, every school that I went to, once I left there, it closed down. So the year that I, it stayed open one other year, but once I left and our graduating class left, the school had closed down.
Okay. And I believe Monkland's now is a seniors residence.
That's right. That's what it became right after that.
Wow. Okay, interesting.
Okay, people are watching us around and they're going, we don't care.
It's History Montreal. We're trying to bring everything to you in one episode. So, a young David Edey, and we're trying to find out now.
I went to Dawson College. Got my degree in social sciences. Then went on to Concordia University, and I got my degree in economics. I wanted to get into the financial area. First, I thought I wanted to be a stockbroker. Then I thought the stockbroker was just limiting myself in terms of when it came to individual personal finances. So I got into financial planning, and I've been a financial advisor for more than, it's going to be close to 40 years now.
Okay, wow, interesting.
And along the way, I met a young black man that was a busboy at Crickets. And I could see a gleam in his eye that one day he would probably have a show or something.
Yeah.
And I could see it.
I don't know if you were a good tipper, though. I don't know. Well, here how it used to go, right? The waitresses used to get the tips, and then they would kind of maybe cut that up and then give it to the busboy. So I don't know if you were a good tipper at that.
When I was in the I don't want to make this sound like... When I walked in the restaurant, did everybody know who I was? Was I very nice?
Very nice.
Okay, so what would that mean? That I would be a...
Good tipper.
Okay.
You're a good tipper. There you go. Good tipper. But in high school, now as a teen, were you introduced to money? Was money just... was it something which was discussed at home?
It wasn't... I wouldn't say it was discussed at home, but I could see through the hard work that my parents. My dad was a taxi driver. My mom was a seamstress, but she also had what the kids call today, what you young people call it today, had their little side hustle.
Okay.
So my mom did cake decorating. She did a lot of baking. Okay. My dad, again, had his side hustle. He was a taxi driver, but he also was a photographer.
Okay.
And I grew up, seeing. Back in those days, you would have the dark room, and where we lived on Gerwood, we used the bathroom as the dark room. I remember doing my dad doing all of the negatives and putting it all through the chemicals and that sort of stuff. Funny story. Years later, I'm on Via 1 sitting in the business class. This porter comes up to me, and he says, I see your name. I said, are you related to Frank Edey? And I said, yes. And he says, your dad did my wedding. Wow. And he showed me some of the pictures. He had a picture of his wedding. And he says, your dad did that. And that made me feel good because I knew how much, not only did my dad enjoy the photography, but he also passed on that, the love of that and making other people happy. And that was through his entrepreneurial spirit. Okay. Same thing with my mom.
So talking about that entrepreneurial spirit, so that was something that you grew up or it was in the household.
Absolutely. It's passed on through me. Now one of my sisters, my older sister Velma, and her daughter, Dawn, they have their own, they've taken my mother's hot sauce recipe and they bottled that and now they sell that. And so my mom was the matriarch, funny lady, and she kept us all in line. And she passed on those strong work ethics through myself and my sister, and now on to her granddaughter. And the next generation, which is my son, but also my new granddaughter, Penelope, or as I call her, P-Baby.
P-Baby. Got to keep things short. P-Baby, P-B.
There's P-Baby, but there's only one P-Baby.
So what made you now, because you had mentioned, when you wanted to become a stockbroker. I mean, what was the draw to that? Because some people think a stockbroker, in the boiler room, making money, making deals.
Well, that's where I could see that's where it was, because it was more dealing in, individual stocks and that sort of thing. But I was more interested in the holistic approach to someone's personal finances. Mm-hmm. So it's talking about not only investing, but also the retirement goals, the estate goals, the tax planning. So it was more broad-based in terms of helping somebody handle their personal finances from A to Z. So that's where I was more interested in, because it wasn't just focusing on the investment side.
Wow. Okay. And I mean, as a young black man, as a stockbroker, I mean,
Well, I wasn't a stockbroker. I ended up becoming a financial advisor.
Financial advisor.
Yep.
But getting into the field, I mean, I don't think that there were many black financial planners, financial advisors back in the day.
No.
Compared to what I'm seeing now here today. So Did you incur any challenges?
I didn't incur challenges because I wouldn't use that as a sort of a crux saying, well,
Okay.
because I'm black
Yeah.
and some of that. Not only did I, in my career, but I wrote 2 books back then, and that led me to being in Toronto a lot because I had clients in Toronto.
Okay.
So I ended up doing a lot of media, CBC. I hosted shows on CFRB, which is equivalent to CJD here in Montreal.
Okay.
So I had national exposure. I also wrote for advisors in the trade magazine for over a decade, Investment Executive, which led me to, the newspaper used to be part of, they would have investment awards every year.
Okay.
And one year they asked me to go up on stage and hand out an award. Long story short, apparently I was engaging and funny. So 2 years later, I'm standing in front of all of the top investment
Wow. Okay.
executives on stage opening up the show. I was the host, one of the hosts.
Okay.
So again, never used, it's quite evident I'm a black man.
Yeah.
But I've never used that as a problem. I see it as the other person has a problem because I have no problem. I can get along with everybody.
Okay.
Well, almost everybody.
And all these you're mentioning, you've developed a network, Toronto, media, CBC. I mean, is this something that you had planned out? Or is it something that which just came organically when you got into the field? Is it something, this is what I want to do?
Well, it's being an entrepreneur, and I've always been intrigued by, well, I can't do that, or I could do that, I can do that. I ended up writing for the Gazette. Years ago, they used to have called It's Your Business, and I would read the paper, and it used to be a supplement inside the Gazette, and I was reading. I said I could do that. I hadn't. That was the first time I ever started to write.
Okay.
And I just picked up the phone and called the editor and talked him into it.
The only thing they could tell you is no, right? Nothing tried, nothing done.
Exactly. What's the worst thing that happens? No.
Yeah.
And that a lot of times that holds back a lot of people. That I don't know if I can do this. The worst case can happen is no. And I've heard a lot of no's in my life. But all I'm looking is for one. I'm looking for one yes.
Yeah.
So
open up the door and
then you just continue on. And it's allowed me to do a lot of amazing things in my life just by just keeping at it.
Okay. And one of the amazing things is the book here, Executor Help How to Settle an Estate, Pick an Executor, and Avoid Family Fights. Last Will and Testament. Why did you decide to write this book?
Well, like I said, 20 years ago, I wrote 2 books on investing. And then it was 11 years ago, my parents passed away. I lost both of them within 18 months of each other to cancer. And what I had found at that time is that what ended up happening is it took 7 years, 10 court appearances, and $50,000 to settle their estate, and they had a will. And every time I would tell people what I was going through, I would hear about another family that had broken up, and an executor was having problems with beneficiaries. So I didn't want anybody to go through what I went through. So during COVID, I wrote the book.
Okay. And working in the financial field and going through all of that difficulty that you're mentioning, I mean, that must have been. I mean, what emotions were you going through? I mean, you're figuring.
Well, what I've come to find is that when it comes to families, especially in black families, families in general, but in black families, because there's a lot of traditions and things of that nature, and families won't talk about death, money, and
very uncomfortable discussions.
So they're not going to talk about it. They're going to avoid it. They're going to procrastinate, or some families are going to think, or someone's going to think, well, I'm going to be apathetic. I'm not going to be here. What will it matter? But actually, it's going to be a big problem. It's a big problem in Canada as a whole. It's 60% of most Canadians don't have a will or an up-to-date estate plan. Mostly men have wills and women don't, so there's a problem there. And the other big problem is that we're about to pass through, because of what's gone on in terms of personal wealth, real estate, your investments, RSPs, those things have gone up. We're about to pass through in the next 10 years the largest transfer of wealth. Close to $1 trillion is going to transfer to parents to children.
Okay.
And if there's no will and there's no any talk or conversations of how the legacies are going to be passed on, we're going to have a big problem. And that's what we see. Courts today are filled with people fighting over cottages, homes, money. If there was a business, there's they're fighting over it because there's no succession plan in place. And especially in the Black community, a lot of families have people who have properties on the islands.
On the islands, yeah.
And again, if there's no conversations, not the proper paperwork in place, then it just leads to problems. It leads to families fighting. I mean, I can tell you plenty of problems.
How do we be proactive? I mean, it's a cultural thing. How do we change that mindset to say that, how can we make these uncomfortable decisions? I mean, I would call it less uncomfortable, because now you're mentioning $1 trillion of wealth passing over and people not having things in place, and rather deal with the situation now rather than deal with it in the end where it becomes a toxic situation, the fights, disputes, rather than sit around the table. Whose responsibility is it? Is it the family? Is it the state? Is it the individual?
It's the family, but it comes down to the family. Let me explain. There's 3 types of families. There's a family that's going to bury their head and not talk about it because they believe that nobody's going to die. There's another kind of family.
There are people. We are not. Nobody's dying. We are living here for eternity.
Spoiler alert: we're all going to die. Okay, spoiler alert. So I don't want to mess this up for nobody, but this is what's going to happen. Okay. So there's that family. There's a second kind of family that's going to, we have a will in place, but nobody knows where it is. Nobody knows what's in it, or we haven't even told the executor what's going on. So that becomes a surprise. And then there's a third type of family, where there's going to be some communication and they're preparing the next generation. In some communities, in the wider white community, there are families that are going to hold family meetings and they talk about passing on money to the next generation. And when I talk about money, people will say, "Oh, you're talking about estate, you're talking millions of dollars." Everybody has an estate. If you've got a bank account, you've got a car, and you've got a little bit of money, you have an estate. You need to have a will.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a will, that's okay, because the government has a plan for you, and they got you covered. So if you're going to leave it to the government plan, then you're allowing them to make the decisions on how your estate is going to be transferred. So you need to figure out, how am I going to have an estate plan? How do I start? You can go to a lawyer, or you can even do it online. There's a lot of great solutions that you could do online. If you don't think you have a lot, and you don't have a lot, and it's not going to be complicated, it's not that difficult. For less than $200, you could have a proper will put in place.
I think the mindset is, for a lot of people, is that to say, if we're going to start to be making decisions around money, you need to have money.
Yeah.
And no, that's not necessarily the situation.
But everybody has something. Yeah. You might think, that's only for rich people.
Rich people, yeah.
You can't. You have some sort of assets, so you can't take the mindset that that's only for rich people. You have assets. Do you have a bank account? You've got a little bit of money. Doesn't matter how much it is. You have an estate.
Here's a practical thing, David. With the financial empowerment project we have, a lot of our participants are, we call it people who are at the lower end of the social economic scale. Some of them are even on welfare.
Right.
And everyone said, I don't have anything. Why do I need to start thinking about finances? I'm just trying to make sure I can pay my rent or put shoes on my kids' feet.
And you just brought up a point there. shoes on your kids' feet. I have actually, there's a story in the book about a friend of mine. She came to tell me when I was writing the book, started to write it, she was telling about the reason why she, as a single mom, wanted to make sure that her kids were taken care of. Because she remembers when her mother had passed away and it was just her father. And then 2 years later, her father passed away. And she remembers in the parking lot of the funeral home that one uncle took her and another aunt took her brother. And that's how, and every time, and she's happy now today. She's successful. She's, had a rough time because she lived without her parents, but she remembers that every time she needed money for schooling or anything like that, her aunt had to go petition the court to get some dollars so that was without a will, because her parents or even her father didn't say, okay, I have put aside these dollars, or I want this relative to look after the kids. When you die intestate, which means you die without a will, you're now leaving the plan to the government to make that decision for you. So when it comes to the kids, the government now decides who looks after your kids.
Wow. Yeah, like I said, this is real talk, people. This is Brian Smith. I'm speaking with David Edey here, author of The Executor Help: How to Settle an Estate, Pick an Executor, and Avoid Family Fights. Something, David, also, a mentality is that, I know that when I was as a teen, I figured that, anything finance, go to the bank. Need money, go to the bank. Need a loan, go to the bank. And the banks are supposed to be there to help you. And I guess that's the image they project. Is that really the case? Are banks our best friend?
The bank is not a person. The bank it's going to have employees. It's going to have advisors. You're going to have advisors that don't work at the bank. What you're looking for is to have a conversation with somebody who has your best interests at heart, and who's going to listen to what your goals and objectives are. Because a lot of people aren't versed in the subject when it comes to investments, RSPs, savings, that sort. And you just need someone to help you make the proper decisions. So the bank is one place. The bank is where the money is, right? Or if you need it. But you're going to be bringing the money to the bank. And the bank is making money off of your money or the investments. So everybody is looking after you because you're taking that extra step to talking to an advisor who might work at a bank, or I don't work at a bank, but I'm an independent advisor. I will have the conversation with you, but I'm still doing the same services that a bank will do. What it comes down to is the individual that you're working with. Do they understand what you're looking for, and do they have your best interests at heart? Like I said, I've been doing this close to 40 years.
Yeah, because we hear, once again, we hear a lot that, you go into a bank, or even it could be another financial advisor or an insurance person or whatever, and people figure, you know what? Yeah, I got something, and, it sounds good, looks good, and, people don't really understand what they got, or they've got a plan that's not really fit to them, and they're scared to ask questions, or they don't feel comfortable to ask questions.
First off, I always go with the rule. I don't like it when somebody says, what you figure out what's best for me. Something. Let me tell you, it's not my money, it's your money. Mm-hmm. What you're paying me for, or you're paying an advisor, is to give you good advice. They should give you options, 2 or 3 options of based on what you say that you're looking for, and let you choose from there. But it's also important that you understand what you're getting involved with and why you're doing what you're doing. My other biggest thing is, as an advisor, I take it kind of personally because you've come to me to have a conversation to talk about your money. There's nothing more personal than your money. Mm-hmm. And if you understand that as an advisor, then you have to also understand when you make decisions that you're thinking about the mentality, the temperament of the individual when you're helping them make the decisions of what's going to get them to where they want to be.
Okay. People, as I said, this is Brian Smith here. As I said, we are talking to Mr. David Edey. And David, we want to get back to the book. Last Will and Testament.
which is an amazing book. I don't want to say anything. It's already won an award, and it's on the
Oh,
way to
you
win
hear
another
that?
award.
Hey, well,
I don't want to brag, but it's just
We've got the author here, so I mean, hey, facts are facts, people.
if you don't toot your own horn, there's going to be no music.
Well, okay. So first of all, so where can people actually get the book? Let's get to the book. Where can people get the book?
You can go to Indigo. You can get it at Amazon. You can go to my website, davidedey.com, and you can buy it there. It's available everywhere, wherever fine books are sold.
Fine books are sold. Okay, and seniors. You've been a financial planner advisor for many, many years.
Which you keep bringing up.
Many
years.
years.
We've gone
I
through.
don't want to bring up 30 because 30 is a big number.
Well, it's
Because
close
there's
to 40,
many
but you know what you
40.
said? A young guy.
A younger.
Who was thin to where he is today. He's older, making me...
No, but you look very, you're keeping in shape.
Well, I'm dressed in black. But it doesn't matter. It's thinning.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you find that are you getting a lot of youth coming to you for financial advice, or is it are you mostly, is it more the older citizens that you're dealing with? I mean,
it's not as much younger people because younger people have more
options. Yeah.
They're doing it online.
There you go.
They're not really big on having conversations, talking to people. They rather be texting.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. I don't want to sound like an old person.
Yeah.
Just looking over at you. I don't want to feel like an old person, but that's what the kids are into.
Well, and that's
As your camera lady off the side holds up her phone.
So it brings another question too. I mean, so yourself now. I mean, speaking with you before, and you are online. I mean, have you been able to make a transition from? We'll talk about being face to face. You sit down. Now things are online. How has the online environment? How have you dealt with that?
Well, I look at the online again. I've always found it fascinating. So that's why I took time to learn how to build a website so I can build websites. I've helped people build their own for their business and stuff like that. And I always found that interesting. The reason the way my brand is working now is that, yes, I'm using my online from my website. I have a podcast now, and which makes it interesting because it's based off of the book, but it's sort of developed in terms of having conversations with people in the area of not only estate planning, but talking about death, talking about grief, and also end-of-life decisions and stuff like that. And it's been really interesting. So, and it's another way to get my message out. Again, the reason why I wrote the book is I didn't want people to go through what I went through, and people are just uncomfortable to have those conversations.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people listening to or watching us right now saying, what's this guy talking about? He knows absolutely nothing about my family. He sounds like he's blowing smoke. Let me tell you something. You have no idea how people are going to react when you're gone. You have no idea how they're going to treat your executor. And you really don't know about somebody until you have to share an inheritance with them. Believe me, I know.
Yeah.
So if you make the decision that, yes, I want to become a good example to, build a bridge for the new and the next generations, then it's up to you to make the decisions now to make sure that you see that your family is going to grow and flourish in the future. Or you can decide to leave them lost and in chaos. It's totally up to individuals, but you need to start to have those conversations.
No, it's very, very important. I mean, I could even say for myself, I mean,
Are you married?
Yes, I am married.
Do you have a will?
Yes, I do have a will.
Well, have you had a conversation with your executor?
Need to revisit that. Okay. And that's real talk. That's real talk, people.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
Not gonna
All
lie.
right. So,
but also, but the thing though is, and as I said, because everything that you were talking about, so I lost maybe 5 years ago. I lost 2 uncles within like 1 week, and it was very, very, call it traumatic for the family. And then this is a kind of like the first time now I'm really encountering death of an uncle, because I was knock on wood, most of my uncles were alive and living, and then we lost 2 back to back. And then now the stories, is there a will? There's no money for a funeral. uncle is calling, the kids are calling for this, and they want to know what's going on, and because there was no planning put into place.
It wasn't the plan. Well, there's the planning, but there were no conversations.
There you go. No conversations, and I just remember that a lot of stress came down on my mother because my mother was always the one who everybody got along with, and they said, Aunt Valerie, they need you to take care of this. And this is totally new to her herself, and going to the bank and having all these discussions. And as I said now, the
Was
kids,
your mother the executor?
No, she was not. She wasn't even the executor.
Did they have a will?
There was no will.
So then they died intestate. So what happens is the courts or something had to be decided. Someone has to step up and take over. So it sounds like your mom was sort of took over the job where she had absolutely no idea where to go, where to start.
Exactly.
Which is the problem with most executives.
So it was meetings, going to the bank, finding this out, getting the paperwork together. Also, too, she was, for the past year, she was responsible for kind of taking care of her brother and a whole bunch of, it was like totally new. So you're kind of like learning on the job type of thing. And I know that it was tough on the family, but it was really tough on her. So it's, for her now, it was like a wake up call now, where then having those discussions with me and my brothers, talking about making sure that these things are put into place. So it's like,
so she has a will?
Yeah. You know what? The will was always there,
okay,
but we never talked about it. It was never talked about.
Which is family number 2. Remember I said?
There you go. It was never talked about, and we need to have things put in place. And as I said, people are getting older and reduced mobility and things like that. And as I said, I can't say I'm not 100% comfortable talking about these things, because I'm coming from the mindset like, you're going to be around, or if we talk about, call it taboo, we're going to talk about death, then it's going to come on to you. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous, but I mean, people do think like that.
Well, it's a lot of people who want to do the estate and legacy planning, but they're afraid of the unknown because they don't know what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
They're also afraid of losing control, because at some point they're going to need the family to look after them, and they feel they're going to lose control of what they have.
Exactly.
And then the third thing is there's the time factor. They see their friends and family around them either passing away, and they're getting older, but they're still held back. They're still afraid to do anything. Yeah. But again, this is about having the conversations to make it easier on your family. This is probably the greatest gift of love that you can give your family, is to have those conversations about your legacy. And people who do that, and families that do that, they tell me that they are relieved, that they finally are organized and got it, and they understand. They're confident that everybody knows what their wishes are.
Exactly, yeah.
And then the third thing is that they're cared for. So when the time comes and they're going to lose control, they're going to need their family, and they know that they're loved and cared for, and then they've had the conversations about end of life, organ donations, funeral arrangements, and that sort of thing.
And if you look at it, right, it really is common sense. I mean, if you look at it, right, it's to say, you know what, let's look at everything, let's put everything in place. We've got to come to realize that we're not going to be here forever. Put these things in place. As I said, another thing too, I'm not comfortable with. I mean, I know my wife had mentioned, let's go to the funeral home and pick all these things out and get those things put away, just so that everything is in place. And how are you going to pay for all these things? Some people are very comfortable putting those things in place. Me, I'll tell you honestly, it's like it's a frightening situation.
Absolutely, that's the reason for the book. And one part we didn't even touch on, people have to also have the conversations about their digital life, which means digital life is everything that you've ever, because we spend so much time online, and we've created this digital life, which means it's anything you've ever created, purchased, or done online.
Okay.
So for every one email address, there's at least 130 digital identities related to that email address. So that's your online banking, that's YouTube, social media like Facebook, Twitter. Okay, and if somebody doesn't know where all the logins and passwords are, if they can't get into a laptop, a cell phone, a tablet, there's going to be a problem going forward. in terms of happening, not only getting into the banking, but also social media. A friend of mine passed away a year ago. And I keep seeing it. No, it's 2 years ago she passed away. And I can see the LinkedIn and the Facebook still coming up. And every time I see it, I'm going, they don't know where the passwords are. Because it's talking about her birthday. It's talking about her employment at the company. So the executor or her husband doesn't know how to shut it off because they don't know the passwords and stuff like that.
So what happens now, not necessarily myself, but I have a lot of friends and we're investors in, we have cryptocurrency and, what happens if we drop off the face of the earth and that the password, do we need now to share those passwords with our spouse? What happens to all of those resources?
What do you think is going to happen? Brian, what do you think is going to happen?
It's just going to stay there forever and ever. And nobody's going to know about it.
Did you have a conversation? Do you have it written down somewhere in case of emergency? Think of it, break this glass. What?
It's in my head.
Wow, that's going to be great since you can't talk anymore, but you're in your casket with your pillow.
Yeah.
And it's with you. So what are you going to do?
So I see a lot of people, such as myself. I mean, we're involved with online banking, we're involved with online investments, cryptocurrency. What's going to happen if, God forbid, something happens to us and, it's like, yeah, I know the password, but is that what happens to all those resources, that money, those millions of dollars that I've made?
Are you finished now?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Because you couldn't even say it with a straight face. all those millions of dollars. Well, anyway, all of those millions of dollars that you have in your crypto, you need to, and your friends should have, individual, unless it's a group effort you got in those investments, you need to make sure that those digital assets, those logins and passwords can be found along with your will. Mm-hmm. So those are other things that are going to have to be, does your wife know you have the cryptocurrency?
Who?
What? Okay, so I don't want to get your business. Okay, well, so I didn't mean to out you like that. Sorry. Okay. Well then, a friend of yours has this crypto from what you told me. This friend of yours has some crypto. Yeah. So this could be, on the passwords that you would keep and say, honey, if anything ever happens, then this is where you'll find them.
Okay. So I think, what we're talking about here, and this is for everybody. We need to kind of maybe do a financial health check as far as, logins, passwords, getting things together so that, when we're ready now to speak to somebody such as yourself, David, when you have that initial meeting, that initial intake meeting with a client, whether it be an individual or a family, what are some of the things that you're expecting from them?
That's off to the side for the estate plan. So in my book, I have a list of all the things that you should do to have, even for the digital assets.
Executor help, people. That's it. Help.
All of the digital assets, I've got the breakdown for all the social media companies, what you have to do for each one. Wow, to get that all organized to help the executor.
Okay, wow.
So, but the estate planning is part of, the book is basically for someone who's at the point within their personal financial plan in terms of their investments, their retirement, and now they're looking at the estate to prepare themselves in terms of any unexpected emergencies. Okay. And the book is for an individual who wants to prepare their executor. And when you talked about your mom, what she had to go through, on average, it's about 100 hours that someone's going to have to spend as an executor. Mm-hmm. And it could take anywhere from 18 to 24 months because most people have no idea what to do, which leads to a lot of mistakes, delays, and they've got also end up in court. And there's a ton of things to do, which you talked about with your mom. So the book is for an individual who wants to prepare the executor. So I have in the book how to have those conversations. And it's also for the individual who wants to get their estate in order and all the things that they need to do to make sure that their plan is taken care of.
Okay, so people, the executor help, how to settle an estate. Want to try to avoid these family fights, last will and testaments. I was going to ask you, David. People like to see fights. What has been the most we'll call it stickiest situation you've ever encountered as far as with the family and, well, maybe not getting into so much detail, but.
Why do you want to get somebody's business?
Because now we're talking, we don't want names, but, because we're talking about money, I'm probably sure,
But you know what's a perfect example of fights? Did you watch the TV show Succession?
Yes, I did, sir.
Okay, what was that show based on? It was based on a guy who clearly didn't write his will properly, and he had 4 knucklehead kids who were all fighting over
for the money.
Fighting over his. And actually, I'm going to do an upcoming episode on my podcast talking about, because there's 5 mistakes that their family made and ended up there. But if you can see, there's clearly he had no conversations with them, because the kids all had their own thoughts of what their father meant to them, who was going to run the company, that sort of stuff like that. So I'm not going to. So I'll use them as an example. Okay. I know you want to get.
No. But these. I mean, as I said, we're talking about money. We're talking about family, and I guess the unknown. And we see sometimes on TV in Hollywood that somebody was left out of the will and they're shocked. And do these things actually happen? I didn't get anything, and it's like.
Well, you just look at recently with Aretha Franklin. They had she had 4 handwritten wills. What could possibly go wrong there? She had 4 handwritten wills. One of the last 2, that's where they were in court fighting over. And one son was saying we want it that way. The 4th one was found in a cushion on the sofa she used to sit on, and that's the one they ended up going with. Even though it sort of altered the estate in terms of the house, the money, and that sort of more money went to the grandchildren and stuff like that. So it's not only, you would say, even with a lot of people with a lot of money, they don't have the conversations. You look at Prince. Prince died without a will. Yeah. You look at
we see a lot of it happens with a lot of entertainers. I mean. For me, as somebody, as I said, with the Jamaican origin, and I remember when Bob Marley passed away, and it was a mess. It was a huge mess.
In my book, I talk about Nelson Mandela. Side note, if you ever want to go change your life and have travel, go to South Africa. And I talk about that in the book, but I weave that in to talk about the problems that his family went through when he passed away.
Okay.
So, it doesn't matter if it's someone with a little money or a lot of money. If there's no conversations, there's no will, you don't prepare the executor, you're going to end up in court. There's going to be family fights.
People, this is Brian Smith here. I'm speaking with David Edey. This is for the Scale Up Financial Empowerment Project put on by the Multicultural and Diversity Project. David, a final word for some of the seniors who are listening, watching this evening, around what they can do in the short term to help their situation?
Well, I think the first thing they need to think about is what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind, and how you want to leave the family. The second thing would be, it's not what you leave people, but how you're going to leave them. And the third thing is you want to create and leave a legacy and not a legacy in a mess. And the only way you're going to do that is to have conversations that matter. And to do that, you make sure that you have the conversations with your family. They may or may not like it. It's going to be uncomfortable. They may or may not like it, but it doesn't matter. It's your estate. You decide how you want things to go. And then the last thing is to have the conversations with your executor. Prepare them, because you're asking somebody to do the biggest favor for you, to talk to the tax department, to deal with unruly, ungrateful beneficiaries. Because the beneficiaries are only looking at, where am I getting my money? When am I getting my check? True. Whereas they have no idea what all of the work that's involved to get you to that point. And I talk about that in the book as well. So do all of those things, and you'll, again, like I said before, you're going to feel relieved, confident, and cared for just by having those conversations that matter.
And one last thing, David, just tell everybody where they can get the book.
all fine bookstores. Just go to, or you can go to my website, davidedey.com. I've got a bunch of free resources where you can download a checklist that you could put with your will, or if you're an executor, all the things that you have to go through. You can get the book, as I said, at bookstore, or you can also go to Audible, and for your listening pleasure, you could have my voice talk to you right through. So it's however you want to get the book. The important thing is to, again, leave a legacy and not a legacy and a mess.
There you go, people. It's David Edey. My name is Brian Smith. This is for the Scale Up Financial Empowerment Project. And remember, what you don't know can cost you. David, thank you very much.
Brian, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate it.